Hello everyone, this is George with Beyond the Test Tutoring, and today I'm going to go over the rhetorical synthesis questions, the last questions on the SAT English section for the digital SAT. This is a new question type for the digital SAT that didn't previously exist. It still involves the same kind of reasoning as a lot of other reading questions or a lot of reading questions you may have done for class, but there are a couple of ways that we can recognize these questions and make them easier on ourselves. If you watch this video and you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button. Check out some of the rest of our videos. We have some more material on the digital SAT, some tips and tricks to help you get ready for the test. Without further ado, let's take a look at a couple of examples of these rhetorical synthesis questions, which basically are going to ask us to read some notes and then do something relative to those notes. So let's take a look at this first one, and these questions are peeled directly from the SAT Suite Question Bank, which is publicly available to anyone to use. You can sort by difficulty level, you can sort by question type, and so on and so forth. So this one is a very simple one. You can see the difficulty rating here is level 1. This is just so we can kind of see what these questions are all about. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The Philadelphia and Lancaster Turnpike was a road built between 1792 and 1794. It was the first private turnpike in the United States. It connected the cities of Philadelphia and Lancaster in the state of Pennsylvania. It was 62 miles long. And now here comes the meat of the question. The meat of the question here is what the prompt actually is. The student wants to emphasize the distance covered by the Philadelphia and Lancaster Turnpike. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? On a lot of these questions, that prompt alone is going to be enough to tell us what the answer is, because only one of the answer choices will often answer that prompt. So if we look at the 4 answer choices, we want to emphasize the distance. So we've got A, that does talk about the 62-mile long turnpike. Right? We've got B, it says it was the first private turnpike in the United States. No mention of the distance here. C tells us it connected 2 Pennsylvania cities and tells us when it was built. Also no distance. And then D tells us that it's a historic road and it tells us when it was completed. Again, no distance. So the only one that mentions distance at all here is A. Now you might be asking yourself, why would I bother reading the notes? And to a certain extent, you're right. A lot of these questions can be answered without reading the notes. This is a particularly simple example. They do get a bit harder. And there is one type of question here where you do have to pay attention to what the notes say, because multiple answers will appear to answer the prompt, but one of them will have an inaccuracy based on the notes. We'll get to that in just a minute. Let's take a look at one that's slightly more difficult here. You can see this difficulty rating is 2. And of course, you don't see the difficulty rating on the actual test, so you don't know how hard they're going to be. And let's try by just going directly to the prompt here. When researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes, whatever, and we can just take a look at the prompt here. The student wants to explain why brine pools are toxic to most sea life. And there's a big key word here. We really want to pay attention to when the question says something about why or how. Why is the reason, how is the process. Okay. So this wants to know the reason that brine pools are toxic to most sea life. Let's take a look at the answers. Remember, we haven't read the notes yet. Let's see if we can figure it out without doing that. A says, though brine pools are toxic to most sea life, some bacteria can survive there. That tells me that they're toxic. It doesn't tell me why. So it's definitely not A. B, the water in brine pools is toxic to most sea life because it is 3 to 8 times saltier than the surrounding ocean. That word because should be ringing a bell here. Typically, when we answer the question why, we answer it with a because, cause and effect, if you will. So this definitely gives us a reason. Now here, we do want to check C and D to make sure none of the other ones give us a reason also. The brine pools in the Gulf of Aqaba are toxic to most sea life and were discovered by researchers in 2022. No reason given. And then D, brine pools are salty underwater lakes that sit on the ocean floor. That tells us what they are. It doesn't tell us why they're toxic. So we can go ahead and get rid of that as well. And the answer here is pretty clearly B. Again, we do always want to make sure we check all 4 choices here. there may be a second answer that gives us a reason that is incorrect. So let's take a look at the next one here. This one's a little bit harder. This is considered one of the more difficult questions of this variety. And again, let's try our strategy here of just going directly to the prompt. So we have the following notes. The student wants to make a generalization about the materials used in Dow replicas. Now, generalization is a really important word here. That means we want something general, as the word would indicate. And specifically, I want a generalization about the materials used in the replicas. Not necessarily in the original ship or the original whatever. In this case, we're talking about ships, right? So if we take a look at A, a traditional material that was used to stitch together the hulls of ancient dhows, coconut palm fiber rope, is still used by shipbuilders. This looks right because we talk about a material with the ancient dhows, and then we say that it is still used by shipbuilders, but notice that it doesn't specify that it's used in the replicas. And so I don't love this answer. I'm not going to outright dismiss it, but there's probably a better one that references materials in the replicas. Also, this isn't really a generalization. It mentions one specific material. And so we want to probably avoid that because it's suggesting a generalization about these materials. Choice B, the ancient Arab dhow was a sailing vessel used primarily for trade and distinguishable by its triangular sails. That tells us nothing about the materials and nothing about the replicas at all. So it's definitely not B. C, although most materials used in Dow replicas are traditional, some modern materials are used. Aha! Most materials would definitely be a generalization. We are talking about the replicas. We're suggesting that most of the materials are traditional, and then we do say some modern materials are used. That's still a very general statement about the materials used in the replicas. That's probably our answer. Let's check D. Contemporary shipbuilders in Oman build replicas of the Dow. Okay, we do talk about the replicas, which was an ancient sailing vessel with a stitched hull construction. Great, so we know a little bit about how the ancient one was constructed, but it tells us nothing about the materials used in the replicas. And so this is probably not the correct answer, and we can safely say it's C. It's the only one that talks about a general idea about the materials used specifically in the replicas. Let's take a look at one other one here where you'll see the importance of making sure we check all of the answers and also the importance of having to check back the notes. So again, let's start with our general strategy here of just going directly to the question. The student wants to identify an accomplishment of the NCAI. To this point, because we haven't read the notes, we don't even know what the NCAI is, but we could probably narrow it down by just seeing if any of the answers tell us about something that they've accomplished, that this NCAI, whatever it is, has accomplished. Okay, A, the NCAI, founded by representatives of 50 tribal governments, had Napoleon B. Johnson, Cherokee, as its first president. I'm not sure that's an accomplishment. It definitely tells us something about this organization. Whether or not that's accomplishment is a little bit more contextual, so I'm going to say probably not. If we take a look at B, founded in 1944, the NCAI was created by representatives of tribal governments from 50 sovereign indigenous tribes. Not really an accomplishment. More about its founding, right? So we don't know what they accomplished. We just know about how it was founded or created. If we take a look at C, the NCAI's advocacy was key to the passing of Public Law 96-638, legislation formally acknowledging indigenous tribes' rights to self-governance. That's definitely an accomplishment, right? This is something that they accomplished. And so C definitely looks like the answer. And here is where we could run into an issue if we don't check D as well. In 1975, the NCAI passed the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, which was created to protect the sovereignty of indigenous tribes. That's definitely an accomplishment as well. So now we've run into an issue of two answers at minimum that tell us an accomplishment and thus answer the prompt. So now what's going to end up happening is we have to check to see which one is accurate. So we do have to read the notes. So let's take a look. The National Congress of American Indians, cool, now we know what the NCAI is, was founded in 1944 by representatives of 50 tribal governments. Okay, the NCAI was created to protect the sovereignty of indigenous tribes. Okay, that was the purpose, right? That's why it was created. We don't know if they accomplished that. Napoleon B. Johnson was NCAI's first president. Still not an accomplishment, so I guess we can go ahead and eliminate A as well. And now notice that it says in 1975, the U.S. Congress passed the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. Very key here is that it says the U.S. Congress passed this act. And if you're familiar with the way that our government works, you might have even spotted that in D, right? It's unlikely that an organization other than Congress is passing acts, but let's not rely on outside knowledge. It tells us right here that the U.S. Congress did that, not the NCAI. This legislation formally acknowledged the tribe's right to self-governance. The advocacy of the NCAI was a key factor in the law's passing. That makes a lot of sense. When we say that the advocacy was key to this passing, right? To the passing of this law. And note that the law number itself here is not even referenced in the notes. But this legislation formally acknowledging indigenous tribes' right to self-governance, well, then that's what that is, right? Oh, actually, it is referenced. It's referenced in parentheses here. Something we can very easily overlook, as I just did. And so that little subtle difference of who passed the act or whether they helped to pass the act through advocacy is what makes C the correct answer and not D. These questions take a little bit of time to get used to. I just want to be very, very careful here to make sure that we don't just automatically assume that the first one we see that answers the prompt is correct. That's going to be the case a lot. Okay? But as we see in this last one here, we've got two answers that answer the prompt. If they're in reverse order, if D was in place C and C was in place D, and we just went to the first one that said, oh, this is the accomplishment, great, forget the rest of it. We can just write it, pick our answer here. We'd get it wrong. Okay. So always check all of your answers, and if multiple answers are correct for the prompt, you have to check which one is correct for the notes as well. Thank you for watching. Click that subscribe button. Check out the rest of our digital SAT material. And if you have further questions, you can take a look at the video description. We have a link to our website where you can reach out to us directly. And even book a free demo session one-on-one with myself or with Brian to further, to take a look at some more specific material that you may want to see yourself. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.